You've written pretty extensively about what you call white supremacy and Christian nationalism. Is that correct?
Yes, most specifically Christian nationalism.
Got it. Do you believe that white Christians are a problem?
No.
You've written that. I've got an interview here, the transcript from an interview you gave in November of last year with the Interfaith Alliance, where you wrote, quote, or you stated, quote, white Christians have been more a part of the problem than a solution. That was in relation to your views on Christian nationalism. Do you remember that?
Yeah, so I'm including myself, right? I am a white Christian, and I'm saying that white Christians...
That's because of views on Christian nationalism, is that right?
Yeah, so...
Okay. Did you know that 34% of Black Americans support quote-unquote Christian nationalism, and that number is 30% for white Americans?
I think that Christian nationalism is an ideology that every racial group, every religious group embraces or rejects to different extents.
Do you think that Black Christians are also a problem?
So I said no. I said when you asked me if white Christians...
I have the transcript here. You stated in this interview that white Christians are a problem. I'm asking you if you have the same view about Black Christians.
So I think white Christians have done more than other groups to perpetuate white Christian nationalism, and I include myself in that category.
Black Christians support Christian nationalism at higher rates than white Christians, per the statistics that I just read.
So Christian nationalism is an ideology that all different groups can reject, and I think that's one social service.
I got it.
Survey.
No. What my understanding is that the categorical condemnation only applies to white Christians and not to Black Christians. That seems to be your testimony.
So most of my work is working with white Christian communities.
We've got limited time. I know, and I asked you about both, but we've got limited time, so I want to move on here. I just wanted to clear that up to make that very clear for everybody listening.
That may just be one of the most pathetic attempts at a gotcha moment that we've seen recently. The Southern Poverty Law Center was at the center of this hearing, acting as the latest target of the right wing's campaign to quell free speech they disagree with, and to paint one of the last bastions standing in the way of full-blown Christian nationalism in our country as nothing more than a smear machine. Meanwhile, Republicans like MAGA Stooge Brandon Gill here tried to sanitize and launder the image and beliefs of groups the SPLC takes notes on, like Turning Point USA.
Has Turning Point USA ever advocated violence against innocent groups?
Never.
Have they ever harbored, as an institution, harbored racial animus against any group?
No. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Charlie would always say, disagreements come to the front. He wanted to talk with those that disagreed. He didn't want to talk to an echo chamber like we find so many places here in D.C.
Yep. Mr. Perkins, has Family Research Council ever advocated violence against any other group?
No.
Have they ever advocated racial animus or any other type of animus against any other group?
No, to the opposite.
Got it. And Mr. O'Neill, I'll end with you because we're trying to go quickly here. But why do you think that the SPLC labels or has labeled TPUSA and the Family Research Council as hate groups?
They're effective organizations on the opposite side of the SPLC on various political and ideological issues.
Thankfully, Democrats on the committee were on point and prepared to face yet another sham congressional hearing head on.
We saw it at the Tree Life Synagogue. We saw it in Buffalo at the Top Supermarket. We saw it in El Paso, Texas at the Walmart. We saw it in Charleston, South Carolina at church. We see hate crimes every day across America. The president does not talk about extremist racial violence or white nationalism, which the Department of Homeland Security just a couple of years ago defined as America's greatest domestic terror threat. The Trump administration calls Antifa the most serious terrorist threat in the country, although no one can tell us where it's headquartered, who its leaders are, what its structure is, how many members it has, or what crimes it is responsible for committing. A number of the mass murderers who showed up in Buffalo or in El Paso and killed dozens of people themselves in their manifestos and their social media statements said that they were acting based on the statement that and the well-known conspiracy theory that George Soros is engaged in a plan to replace the American population, the so-called Great Replacement theory. Does that mean we can ban that speech? No, we can't ban it, but certainly we should talk about it, and we should talk about the moral implications of people who engage in it. Same thing with people in the pro-life movement who call doctors and physicians who are OBGYNs baby killers, which has led in many cases to doctors being murdered or violently assaulted or attacks on abortion clinics. So it is true that speech does have a real world effect, even though in our society we only allow it to be punished if it's incitement to imminent lawless action.
What I found most effective about Jamie Raskin's defense of the SPLC was how he brilliantly hoisted the right wing on their own petard. For years, these conservatives have draped themselves in the flag of free speech, claiming to be the ultimate defenders of the First Amendment, while simultaneously trying to dismantle any organization that uses their own speech to hold hate groups accountable. Raskin didn't just defend a nonprofit, he exposed the hollow hypocrisy of the Republican platform. By appealing to the very principles they claim to hold so dear, he reminded everyone that free speech includes the right to monitor, document, speak out against extremism. You don't get to demand a safe space from being labeled a hate group while you're busy peddling rhetoric that endangers people's lives. Raskin made it clear that the SPLC isn't the threat to the First Amendment. The people in that room trying to silence them are.
Is the Southern Poverty Law Center a hate group like the Ku Klux Klan or the neo-Nazis? Do they proclaim interest in violence or nonviolence? And has anybody at the Southern Poverty Law Center ever been convicted of engaging in a conspiracy to murder or to engage in violence against anybody, including Charlie Kirk?
I know of no reports of that violence, and I know of SPLC as a civil rights organization that tries to draw awareness to white supremacy and files legal action to protect our civil rights laws.
Okay, so the way that we sort this out in an organized society under the rule of law is that if somebody actually engages in a conspiracy to murder, or aids and abets a murder, or imminently incites violence against someone, they can be prosecuted. Short of that, if they engage in speech, especially the kind of speech the SPLC is involved in, which is trying to stop hate violence in the country, then we essentially leave them alone, except for some reason we've decided to have an entire hearing about one map created by this one group. Look, if we really wanted to promote nonviolent, peaceful discourse in the country and to promote greater understanding and civil peace, which I hope everybody in this room could get behind, what would we be doing? What are you doing to try to promote civil peace and civil conversation and dialogue?
Well, one thing we do at Baptist Joint Committee, along with a number of other organizations, is try to draw awareness to our First Amendment protections for religious freedom, and to make space for all different views on religion, and to help people have some tough conversations, including in religious communities. You know, one of the projects that we work on is something called Christians Against Christian Nationalism. So we don't shy away from difficult topics that we believe do contribute to different issues.
I'm running out of time, but just tell us finally, what do you think is behind this really extraordinary attack on civil society organizations and particular groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Well, I see this as an attack on civil society, as a way to try to quash dissent, as a way to chill advocacy, and that I really fear for the future of our pluralistic democracy if groups and individuals succumb to the intimidation. I think this is a moment that we all need to be leaning into our democratic society and participating like many of us have never done so before.
I couldn't agree more with Raskin's line of questioning, because it cuts to the heart of what this is really about. The SPLC exists to serve and deliver justice to marginalized communities that have been under constant assault by the very ideologies these Republican congressmen are trying to protect. Unlike conservative advocacy groups that spend their time in massive donor funds feeding into systemic racism and manufacturing cultural wars, the SPLC is doing the actual legwork of protecting democracy from the ground up. There's a profound harm in peddling the beliefs that groups like Turning Point USA promote, beliefs that further marginalize the vulnerable, provide a veneer of respectability to white supremacist themes. When Raskin highlights this contrast, he's pointing out that there is no both sides when it comes to human rights. One side's working to uphold the dignity of every human being, the other whining because they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar of extremism.
Based on what I'm hearing, the criticisms of the Southern Poverty Law Center seem to boil down to three things. One, that it has healthy finances and an endowment. Two, that it collaborated with the Department of Justice during the Biden administration. And three, that it calls out white supremacy, including white Christian nationalism. And I guess if my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so hell-bent on the finances of nonprofits, we could also talk about the Koch brothers funding tens of hundreds of millions of dollars to the Cato Institute and Americans for Prosperity. If they're so concerned about nonprofits collaborating with the executive branch, where do I even begin with the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025? Throughout his campaign, Donald Trump disavowed the conservative nonprofits policy blueprint when polls showed that it was deeply unpopular with the American people. But as soon as he took office, he made it the foundation of his policies by appointing at least half a dozen Project 2025 architects and supporters to oversee the federal budget, mass deportations, cuts to healthcare and SNAP, dismantling of environmental protections, policies that harm all communities and disproportionately target communities of color. Now, maybe this shouldn't be a surprise. The president has a history of nominating or appointing officials with racist beliefs, including Paul Ingracia and Carl Higbee. The architects of Project 2025 also have a very well-documented history of writing racist statements or activity. And I won't repeat all of them here, but I do have a visual right behind me with just a couple of examples, including assertions that Black people and immigrants have lower IQs than white citizens. We've known for a while that individuals differ in their inherent capabilities, that racists do too, with whites and Asians on the top and blacks on the bottom. That was from Richard Hamania, contributor to Project 2025. How about this one? The ceaseless importation of third world foreigners with no tradition of, taste for, or experience in liberty means that the electorate grows more left and less traditionally American, whatever that means, with every cycle. That's from Michael Anton, also a contributor to Project 2025. How about this one? The prediction that new Hispanic immigrants will have low IQ children and grandchildren is difficult to argue against. That's from Jason Richwine, contributor to Project 2025. And just today, I was reading an article about a member of the Judiciary Committee who said, it is time for a Muslim travel ban, radical deportations of all mainstream Muslim legal and illegal immigrants, and citizenship revocations wherever possible. Mainstream Muslims have declared war on us. The least we can do is kick them the hell out of America. Do people understand that there's 2 billion Muslims across the world? That is 25% of the global population. And I'm waiting to see if anybody on that side says anything about condemning those remarks about Muslims.
At the end of the day, this entire hearing was nothing more than a taxpayer-funded temper tantrum. It amounts to the right wing pointing fingers and complaining because the left has an effective, high-profile nonprofit that is actually aligned with progressive political goals and human rights. Republicans aren't worried about fairness or accuracy. They are worried about losing their ability to hide in the shadows. They are mad that an organization like SPLC has the audacity to exist, the resources to show the world exactly who they are. Not a conspiracy, it's accountability. If the GOP were actually interested in the American values they preach, they'd be thanking the SPLC instead of trying to put them on trial.